I'm Denise Jacobs. As Brad said, you know where you are. If you're tweeting or doing anything of that ilk, both on Twitter and Instagram, my handle is Denise Jacobs. This is ClarityConf, these things for ClarityConf, and then the hashtag for the presentation, if you want to get all fancy and get in there, is Create Together. So let's talk about this for a moment. Brad said that I wrote a series of books. One of them is Banish Your Inner Critic, which, by the way, I brought a copy for somebody here, so if we get to the point where Brad asks me questions, I might have a question from the audience and somebody's going to get a book. But I used to be a front-end developer, and I wrote a book called The CSS Detective Guide. And then during the process, somewhere during the process, I realized that what I actually cared about more so than helping people build websites was helping people get out of their own way and unblock their creativity and basically unleash their brilliance and share it with the world. And so that's why I became a creativity evangelist, and then also started my consulting company, The Creative Dose, where I consult with companies and help them to unleash creativity, enhance collaboration, and amplify their impact with up-level leadership. So that is that. Now, collaboration. Let's talk about collaboration. When you think of creative collaboration, what immediately comes to mind? And I'm actually asking you, I want to hear from you. What comes to mind? What is the first thing that you're like, creative collaboration, that translates into what? Sticky notes, excellent. And where do you do the sticky notes? What's the environment for that? A room. A room is a good place to do it. It'd be hard to do sticky notes outside, no place to stick them, trying to put them on leaves on the trees. What? One more time? Creative space. But what kind of situation? If you're at work and you're going to be putting sticky notes on something, you're in a what? Oh, yeah. Okay, and that tone of voice, that right there? Meeting. A brainstorming meeting. And you know what happens very often, I won't say all the time, not across the board, but you know what happens very often in brainstorming meetings. The ones where everybody's super engaged and everybody wants to be there. How often does that happen? Rarely, if ever. People are kind of more like this in brainstorming inside. They're keeping it inside. Do people actually share their amazing ideas in these brainstorming meetings, especially if there's no sticky notes? No, that's not what happens. What ends up happening, so look, I used to work at Microsoft about 1 trillion years ago, and I was doing project management for a localization application that they had, and there was always, invariably, an alpha geek who would stand up and basically do the equivalent of pounding his chest and start talking a bunch of gibberish which nobody understood. And then he once he felt satisfied that he had confused everybody and established his dominance, he sat down. And afterwards I'd be like, I don't know what happened. People are looking at each other I don't know what just happened. I don't know, but the meeting is done and we have gotten nothing done whatsoever. And then what ends up also happening is you've got this alpha geek holding forth, and then at the end of the meeting, it's the people who are the loudest, oftentimes. Have you guys seen this? Where it's the loudest ideas, not necessarily the best ideas that get acted upon and actually move everything forward. And that is kind of a problem. Not only that, but have you guys had this situation? Super siloized teams, all the designers working together, all of the developers working together, all of the engineers, all of the sysadmins working together. Nobody talking to each other, right? You get the design part, you throw it over a wall, it gets to the developers and the engineers, and they do it. They don't know, there's no common language of communication to communicate these ideas. They don't ask questions. Has this happened? You're like, that's why we make design systems. So imagine, however, I'm sorry, I'm shouting, I'm getting all excited. You guys are wow, she's just hitting me with the energy. Imagine, here, I'm gonna take it back a couple of notches. Imagine a world where you had diverse teams, right? These cross-functional teams, but they were diverse in all different kinds of ways. And the brilliance of each person, whether they were an extrovert or an introvert, whether they were super loud about sharing their ideas or they just, talked about it kind of over lunch with somebody, and you're like, dang, that is like dope. Like, you need to share that in the meeting, and you look at them at the meeting, they don't do it. But imagine, it happens, right? Imagine a world where that was not the case, where that person with that brilliant idea who told you about it over lunch actually felt comfortable enough to step up and actually say something in a meeting. And then imagine a situation where, because people started feeling comfortable doing this, you had your teams were in this constant state of sharing things, of sharing ideas, incorporating these ideas, and amplifying each other's ideas. Imagine that. Just, use your mind's eye. And then imagine that because your teams and the different, not just your team, but the other teams within the company were working this way, that this creative collaboration caused your company to make these wonderful products and services that not only met the needs of your users and your clients or your end users, but actually maybe exceeded the needs, right? That actually went above and beyond and just really made your company super uber successful. The great thing is that we have this ability and we have this power. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you, all y'all, even the ones in the balcony. Hi, balcony. Hi. Today I'm going to share with you several ways of how you can co-create and create better together. So let's talk about creativity, just very briefly. The cool thing about creativity, especially for me as a creativity evangelist, and I feel like I need like a cape, and like something like blowing out behind me, creativity and like sparkles around me. If somebody can do that for me, that'd be really helpful. But it's really finally being recognized as a really important component of business success. And you guys know this, you build design systems. So just a little bit of like, some kind of historical things that support this. In 2010, IBM did a study and asked leaders and CEOs, like, what's the most important skill for leadership and CEOs in the future? And overwhelmingly, they said creativity was the one. And then, in 2013, Time magazine did a poll and polled people and said, well, what's the most important quality of the people that you want, that you work with? And over humor, over beauty, thank God, because that's so shallow. Beauty, I was like, really? Beauty? Y'all gonna be like that? They were like, yeah, because, the United States and the world and things. Intelligence, over compassion, which is an important thing to have. Creativity was the top skill that people wanted, the other people that they wanted to work with to have. Amazing. In 2016, LinkedIn did a study for like, what are the skills that people need to be like hireable, right? And down there on the list in the top 10, creativity comes in at number 7, not bad. Okay? And then finally, Adobe does a study every year called The State of the Create. And a couple of years back, they came to the conclusion, after all of this polling, all these people they talked to, that creativity and design together is like one of the top things that will actually push businesses forward. You guys are like, I know that. That's why I do design systems. So it means that you're on the right track and you're doing this. So we just need to kind of up-level and kind of supercharge our abilities to collaborate and bring people together and actually move the needle forward. The problem with that is that there is this myth of the lone creative genius. Like there's allegedly this one person who's coming up with all of the good ideas, probably in the basement somewhere. If you lock them up, you give them enough coffee, they're going to come up with something amazing, right? And the thing about that is that they're supposed to be generating all of these ideas, but the truth of the matter is that that's a lot of pressure, especially if you think that you're supposed to be that person, right? That is a lot of pressure to be like on and creative and coming up with great ideas, not just any idea, but great ideas all of the time. So much pressure. And then it also means that then you start being in competition with other people. No, my idea is better than yours. right? And then that means that it's isolating for us. So it ends up putting us in silos and keeps us away from the very thing that makes our ideas great, which is collaboration. Collaboration and the blending of ideas, that's what makes them stronger. And we'll actually experience that a little bit later. And so collaboration is really what we're talking about. And if we go back to that LinkedIn study from 2016, the awesome thing about it is that teamwork was higher than creativity. Teamwork and creativity go hand in hand, and they're necessary components that work together. So working together towards a common goal, that's what we're shooting for. And today I'm going to talk about 4 kind of steps, or steps along the way in the process. I'm going to talk about unblocking, connecting, combining, and then playing. So we're going to have a really good time. And by the way, you guys are not just going to be sitting there hanging out the whole time talking. We're actually going to do stuff. But let's talk about unblocking. Now, here's the thing. The creative process involves many conversations with colleagues and whatnot, but most importantly, conversations with yourself. So this means that we have to do a little bit of inner work before we can do the outer work and before we can actually let our ideas out. With all the research that I've done on creativity and everything, all of the things that led back to it's all about what you're thinking and what you're believing that actually affects what you produce. Now, I'm also going to relate to you a very meta story of when I worked with my colleague, Jesse Sternschuss, to create a presentation that we were going to co-present about creative collaboration. I told you it was meta, right? So this is what happened. Jesse and I were going to be speaking at this conference called Delight Conference in Portland a couple of years back, and they were like, well, let's talk about collaboration. I was like, let's co-present this thing on collaboration. It's going to be great. But what happened is, and incidentally enough, this is like, the irony is not lost on me, I ran into a mental roadblock. And what do you think the mental roadblock is that prevents and gets in the way of creative and individual and collective creativity? What do you think it is? Yep. Yes, Queen. Yes. It is fear. Fears of not being enough, not knowing enough or being expert enough, not learning fast enough, not keeping up with technology fast enough, fears of not being perfect and making mistakes, fears of not being as good or measuring up to your colleagues and the other people that you work with. I was like, I feel like I saw some nods, like, mm-hmm. Fears of being judged and criticized, like having your ideas be judged and criticized. Fears of your ideas being too out there and too unique and too leading edge, right? Because when your ideas really are like breakthrough ideas, people don't get them. They're just like, I don't even know what you're talking about, right? So all of these fears are due to the inner critic. And it's kind of like, thanks, inner critic, but like, no thanks, because you're kind of a pain in the butt and you're getting in the way of all of this great stuff coming out into the world. Because what happens when we are in the midst of all these fears and our inner critic is like super duper active is that we self-censor. We either on a conscious level decide that we're not going to share our ideas, or on a subconscious level, we just stop producing them, right? Because we don't want to deal with all of those fears that I was just listing. The problem with that is that it causes something known as ideacide. It's when you kill your ideas before they even have the chance to sprout and come out and see the light of day. And the problem with that is that it's really awful for your self-esteem. You start to think, I don't have any good ideas, right? You start to believe that, and then not only that, but your sense of self is really destroyed, and the people that you work with don't get the benefit of your ideas. As a matter of fact, your ideas don't have to be breakthrough, cutting edge, earth-shattering, or anything like that. Your ideas can just be these like little tiny sparks, these little tiny bits of something, and that can spark something for somebody else and whatnot. We're actually going to play with that too. So fear, you guys have probably heard the acronym, false evidence appearing real, right? And so here is my first tip to you, is to adopt something called an experimentation mindset. Now, most of the time, culturally, we're like super duper oriented towards something called an implementation mindset. We have to do it, we have to get it right, we have to get it right the first time. There is no like room or margin for error. Experimental mindset, instead, is about exploring different ways, kind of expanding the network of possible wanderings, and to explore and solve problems. So it's really about giving yourself that space and like changing your attitude and like giving yourself the space to like for it to not be great, to potentially fail, right? And to set and just to see like what sticks on the wall. Throw the ideas up and just see what sticks. And the nice thing about that is that makes space for inspiration, and it actually helps you to reclaim your creative power. And not only that, but then ideas will start to flow. So that is the first thing for unblock. There's so many other things I could talk about for unblock, but I want to get to this other good stuff. So let's talk about connecting. Now, creativity, again, because I'm talking about creative collaboration, it's social. It's a great quote from Bruce Nussbaum, who wrote Creativity Intelligence, that creativity comes from these magic circles, these small groups of people who work and play and share ideas together. And so that's what we're really shooting for, this kind of trusted group of people that you feel like comfortable with and that you can work with, that you can share ideas together and you guys can play together. So with Jessie, back to my story, I shared my concern. I told her, I was like, look, you've got so much more experience than this than I do. I feel like I don't have anything valuable to offer. And thankfully, because Jessie's a good friend, she was like, girl, please, I'm waiting for you to say something. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I talked, she listened, and then it was great because when we started to put our ideas together, we actually capitalized on something called the super-linearity of creativity. In other words, the more people you have to put ideas together, the more creativity that you have, because you have more variations, you have more options, you have more ways to go, right? So there's a great quote by Ken Blanchard that says, none of us is as smart as all of us, which I love, and I love to remember that when I'm in a creative collaboration situation. So if you have good ideas, but you're in that midst of fear and stuff, just remember that keeping your ideas to yourself is detrimental, right? You are robbing the other people that you're working with from the opportunity to benefit from your ideas. And so, does anybody remember the movie Lucy with Scarlett Johansson, with ScoJo? So one of my favorite takeaways from Lucy, and I actually watched it again because I was like, am I really putting this correctly? But it's true. In Lucy, one of the scientists was saying that cells will either self-preserve by staying self-contained, or if they're wanting to pass on their information, their genetic information, then they will multiply. Well, if you hold on to your ideas, you're just self-preserving. You're not actually multiplying your ideas. And so you want to be generous. You want to share your ideas and share them with people. But there's a flip side. So remember how I was talking about how there's always that alpha geek over talking and stuff like that in meetings? We also have to listen. To get to some of these good ideas, we have to pay other people the same kind of respect that we want them to pay us, and we have to really, really listen. And so remember that if you're in a place, if you're one of the people who are look, it can happen. There's a lot of folks in here. Not everybody's the people who are the introverts who are keeping their ideas. If you're one of the people who ends up sharing ideas because you're just like, nobody's talking, we have to get this going, we have to get this moving. Remember that over-talking can mute other people. And so Here are some little power tips, like 4 power tips to be, or like 3, to be an adept listener. The first one is to be present. Be super duper present, like just be there in the place. Don't be thinking about other things and your lunch and making your laundry list and everything like that. Also, pay attention. Make sure that you really focus on the person who's talking to you and what they're saying. And then relax your own agenda. Have you ever been in a conversation when you know the other person is barely listening to you and they're just waiting to be able to respond to what you said? You know that like the other person. So make sure you're not that person. Make sure when you catch yourself doing it, just relax your agenda and say, like, I don't even know what they're saying. Let me listen and then see what comes from what they've said. So this is what I want you to do. You guys ready? Choose a partner. Person sitting next to you, person sitting behind you, whatever. This is what you're going to do. Everybody's like, do we have to talk to people? Yes. Good morning. Did you have your coffee? So this is what I want you to do. I want you to think of something you're super excited about. It could be this conference. It could be that you're going on a trip to Greece in 2 weeks. It could be that you're about to embark on like learning a new thing. Maybe you're going to take snowboarding lessons. I don't know what it is, but you're super excited about this one thing. Share what you're excited about with your partner at the exact same time with a lot of energy and a lot of gesturing and everything. And when I tell you to stop, you guys are going to stop. Okay? You ready? Go. Lots of gesturing. Yes. Okay. How was that? It's hard, right? You're both talking at the same time. Who to listen to? All right. This time, we're going to do it the way your mama taught you. Okay, the person whoever you decide who's going to talk first, the person who's talking, sing your song, talk about the thing you're excited about. The person who's listening, listen, encourage them, nod, make those like sounds and all that stuff. And then when I tell you to switch, we'll switch, okay? You ready? Go. Okay, switch. Okay. Stop. Ooh, you guys are good? How was that? Yeah, better? Tell me why it was better. What? You could hear it? What else? How did you feel when the person was listening to you? Validated. That's right. Felt like you were important, right? Right, so that's it. You guys can sit down. Thank you. That was great. So this is how it works. Like simple stuff, right? And sometimes we forget all of those things. We got an agenda. We're not entirely listening. We're not paying attention. We're distracted by things. But those simple things, those simple points will like really transform the interaction and make it so that that when you are speaking and somebody does that to you, you feel validated. And then when you're really, really listening and paying attention, the person who's talking to you feels validated as well. And it builds a sense of trust and safety. So let's talk about combining. Oh, this is going to be so much fun. Can't stand it. I'm so excited. Guys are like, Denise is like, this is why I call myself a creativity evangelist. Like, y'all are getting saved right now. I'm getting the healing. I'll put the healing on y'all. Amen. Creativity thrives on diversity, tension, sharing, and collaboration. And so it's about this sharing part that we're really going to do and actually being able to work with the information that we get with people when we really listen, when we really focus, when we really pay attention and relax our agenda. What kind of information we get from people and then how we can use that to adapt what we were thinking ourselves. And so back to my situation with Jessie. When we talked and all this stuff, and I shared my ideas on what we were going to do in the presentation, she shared her ideas on what she wanted to do in the presentation. Then we combined our Wonder Twin superpowers and activated them, and we created something really great together. And so what you need is everyone. Actually, I think I'm going to go back here. No? What am I doing? Yes. what I'm seeing here is different from what I'm seeing back there. So you need a diversity of people, because from a diversity of people, you get a diversity of ideas, right? And when I'm talking about a diversity of people, I'm not talking about ethnic diversity necessarily only. It's one of the things. But it should be different skills, different abilities, different viewpoints, different backgrounds. And then they can bring this number of approaches, different ways of thinking, right brain, left brain, analytical, creative, big picture thinking, small detail thinking, generators, synthesizers, all genders, different kinds of communication styles, everything. All of that diversity is an advantage. And it's great because the more you have that, the more you're used to it, the more able you are to adapt and respond to different things. And so, I'm so excited about this. This is what we're going to do to try this out. So I've got that. Great. What's up here is different. So this is what we're going to do. This time you're going to choose a different partner. Yay! And we're going to tell you guys are going to share a story. Now, you're going to choose a partner. You guys is like, we got to do a thing again? Yes, you got to do a thing again. I'm waking y'all up. This time, whoever the storyteller is, I'm going to give you the instructions, and you're going to have one storyteller, and you're going to have one listener. Storytellers, these are your marching orders. You ready? You're like, I don't know who's a storyteller yet. You will in a moment. The person who is going to be the storyteller the first time is going to tell a story about having gone and won a free trip to Brazil, and having gone to Brazil and coming back. In the story, you will leave holes or spaces for either a noun or a verb. Listeners, you will listen to the story and do all the great stuff, all the things that good listeners do that I just talked about. When the storyteller leaves the hole for a noun, there's going to be a list on the screen that has a list of nouns, and when they leave a space for a verb, there's going to be the list on the same screen of a list of verbs. Don't try to be cute and help them out by choosing a word that fits with what they're talking about. Just read down the list, okay? Now, find your new partner, not the same person that you had before. Decide who's going to be the storyteller. Storytellers, your back must be to the screen. Make sure your back is to the screen. You can't cheat. No cheating. Okay, ready? Go. Stop. There you go. Hey. Hey. All right. Now, listeners. Now you're going to be the storyteller. Storyteller, you're going to be the listener. Listener, your back is going to have to be to the screen. It's a different story. This time, the thing that was so interesting about this, listener, you were like, dude, I was just in Brazil too, but I was there because I went on an ayahuasca journey. And if you don't know what ayahuasca is, it's basically jungle LSD. So, new storyteller, storyteller number 2, make sure your back is to the screen. You just came back from an ayahuasca trip. It was awesome. And when I say go, go. Are you ready? Go. Okay, tell me everything. How was that? What did you say? Confusing? Trippy. Well, you know, ayahuasca. What can you do? Hashtag jungle LSD. But how was it? How was it to actually force yourself to adapt? How many of you had a complete concept of what your story was going to be? I've done it before. I've been like, and then I'm going to say this, and then I'm going to say this, and they're like, pomegranate. And you're like, oh, Jesus. What am I going to do with that? Okay, then I had a pomegranate because I like red. It's my favorite color. And okay, and then kitten. Oh, Jesus. What am I going to do with that? Right? But it made you, and how many times did the story come out to be better or more interesting because of the words that the person supplied? It was funny, right? I heard a lot of laughing. So this is basically what happens. You get these things, you're going to be in meetings and stuff like that. Somebody's going to say something, it's going to feel like it comes out of left field. How can you make that work? Well, the main way you can make that work is with adopting the spirit of play that comes from improv. And play is how we experiment, talking about the experimentation mindset like earlier, and how we invent things. Josh Clark, badass, you guys probably all know who he is. And so with me and Jesse, when we got to that point, we combined our wonder strength superpowers, and then we felt free to express ourselves, and we started to play. And it became so much fun to work on this, whereas before I had personally had trepidation and anxiety. Jesse, in stark contrast, has an improv background. She lives in this world all the time. And so when you adopt this kind of approach, work becomes play, play becomes work, and the lines blur in between it, and it just becomes completely enjoyable. And so how can we improve and supercharge our collaborations, our creative collaboration with improv? Well, instead of, how many of y'all have been in a meeting, somebody finally dredges up the courage to share an idea, and the first thing somebody says is, yes, but, blah, blah, blah. And it's like you can see them deflating, just getting smaller in their seat because it's yes, but, and it's like, oh, here we go again. And then there's a long litany of why it's not going to work, et cetera. And you're just like, we could have used that and just used it as a springboard. It doesn't have to be something that you're doing. So we're going to work on amplifying others' ideas through a method called plussing. Have you guys heard of plussing? Super popularized by Walt Disney and Disney's company. It's something they use very extensively at Pixar because they had a guy a while ago who was an improv dude, and so they, all of this stuff is infused with it. And so here are kind of 5 power tips for improving with improv. The first one is to start where you are. So no matter what the person says, you work with that. You don't yes, but it. You don't say no. You say, oh, okay. And then you try to figure out how, just the same way when somebody said pomegranate, you're like, okay, I have to figure out how to make pomegranate work in this story. And then you had to change and adapt. So start where you are. Accept the offer. Somebody actually came up with something and they're giving it to you. What can you do with that, right? Then you fully commit. Whatever you are going to say, you are totally committed to that moment, in that moment of adding to whatever that person said. And the response is always yes and. Never yes but, never no. It's always yes and. And then whatever it is that you supply, you make the other person, you make your colleagues look good. Whoever you just added on to, you make whatever they say sound amazing. Because guess what? The person who adds on to what you just said, they're going to make you look amazing. And the person who added on to what they just said, they're going to make that person look amazing. And then the next thing you know, you guys are going to have some awesome ideas that you came up with together. And the other thing, too, is that again, this is, what's it called? Power tools races. That's what this is from. I love this picture so much. Somebody was like, let's put a banana on saw blades and race it. And I'm like, great idea. Stupid, but great. So don't dismiss ideas because it seems like a stupid idea. Because actually, it is often the stupid idea that's the breakthrough idea. So, pieces of paper, finally! Pieces of paper, grab your piece of paper, fold it like a book in half, and then this is what, you guys got writing utensils. If you don't have writing utensils and the person next to you does share, again, your parent, you were raised correctly, I know you were. I want you to think of, so you guys, I have a confession to make. I'm a superhero movie fan, and when Endgame was coming out, I literally prepped for it for a month. And I watched all of the Marvel Comic Universe movies in order. I referred to a website to see which order I should based on what the trailers were and all that stuff. It's serious. So, and also, did anybody see Deadpool? So you guys remember Deadpool 2 when he had the tryouts for the superhero tryouts to join his team? And then what was the name of the guy who didn't have any powers at all? Pete. And he was like, okay, Pooh Bear. So think of the Deadpool superhero tryouts and all the people who didn't make the team. I want you to name that superhero. Is it monitor dude? Is it, exit sign guy? Is it Mr. Nose? Is it like, rail girl? Like, who is the superhero that just never made it to the big time, is not going to be an endgame in any way, shape, or form, is not going to be part of the DC comic universe, the failed superhero that never made it? Come up with that failed superhero name and write it on the inside, the left-hand inside of your piece of paper. Sweet. And when you've written that down, fold it up again, and then what we're going to do is we're going to pass the papers around. So hold up your piece of paper if you got your failed superhero written in there. We're going to pass the stuff around until this piece of paper is like as far away from you as possible. Ready? Just start passing it. Pass, pass. As soon as one gets into your hand, pass it, pass. Excellent. So open up your piece of paper. Now write down the sidekick for whoever you had. All right, I want to hear what you got. Who's got something who wants to share? Yes, tell me.
Pants ironer and sister starches.
Pants ironer and sister starches. Yes, sister starches. She's starchy. So you guys see the kind of creativity you were able to come up with a, quote, bad idea? So starting where you are is super important. Not only that, but then once you have this, I wish I had thought of this. It would have been fun to post these up somewhere and have everybody see what other people came up with, right? And so to help to facilitate the creative process, it's really good to make sure that you have a place where you share these ideas so that not only do they get seen by other people, but then other people can take that and use those as springboards. And so to have a public space for sharing, for putting ideas, to actually post them somewhere where people can respond to them and change them and add to them. So that gets us to the end where we're actually co-creating. And so back to me and Jesse's story, that nice happy ending is that we got up on stage, we presented, we back and forth, ping pong back and forth really well between each other. We ran the exercises. It was so much fun and it was so enjoyable, and it was because we had actually used our own process to teach people about creativity. And so this is kind of a new paradigm in some ways, right? Like most of the time, you know what brainstorming meetings are kind of like, and you've got all the sticky things and nobody talks and all this stuff. But to come at it with this new approach that you can open up this whole world of possibilities, because we already tried to do all the creative heavy lifting ourselves, right? And we also tried to be super clever and think and come up with all of these ideas, which almost invariably never works. When you're working really hard to try to come up with ideas, you almost never get what you really can come up with. So now we're taking this process and we're up-leveling our creativity. And so what I want to leave you with is this. I want you to think of how you show up to creative collaboration. Are you one of the people who's too afraid to share your ideas, too afraid to share your brilliance, even though you know it's in there? You have those ideas, you have those conversations over lunch, you have people being like, dude, that's amazing, why don't you say something, right? Or are you somebody who's afraid that other people might take your idea, and so that you're keeping your ideas to yourself, or you're keeping it to yourself because you don't think it's perfect, or you don't want to make a mistake or whatever, or it might be too out there? Or are you one of the people who's always giving ideas and therefore potentially bulldozing other people who are on the more quiet side and aren't as sure of themselves? When you collaborate and you get past this and you start to incorporate these things that I've talked about, you will actually create a situation where you all have support, right? And so I want you to remember, it starts with you, okay? Collaboration flourishes when there's a willingness to embrace new practices and thinking. And so I just gave you a whole bunch of them. And so take all this stuff so that you can tap into the collective brilliance that surrounds you, that you can co-create to make better things, but really, most importantly, to make things better. Is my power thing going on? Oh, Sue, that's stupid. That's okay. Well, heavy memory usage. This is like an intense thing. It's very intense. And then you can make things better together. And so that's it, you guys. Thank you so much. Like I said, I have more stuff about creativity, obviously, in my book, Banish Your Inner Critic. You can get the slides if you go to deniseslides.com. And if you want to continue the conversation and reach out to me, there's all my information plus my heavy memory usage. So there is that. Thank you so much, you guys. I appreciate it. Whew.
That was freaking awesome.
Yes.
You hear that? That was a powerful high five.
Because he's a good high fiver.
It was great. I told you, right? Like, that's so good. So, this is a design systems conference. Creativity abounds.
It does.
Right? What do you think? I encounter this a lot in my own work. There is like a duck into different organizations, and there's like, here's the creative people, and here's the other people.
Right.
What do you do? You go into a bunch of companies and stuff. Like, what do you do to that?
So let me just like go back to the audience. How many of y'all feel like you're more on the creative side? How many of y'all feel that? How many of y'all feel like you're kind of more on the technical and analytical side? How many of y'all do that? Okay. So yeah, it's actually a good split. So one of the things that I like to tell people who perceive themselves as technical and analytical is I like to point out that there's a lot of ways to think about creativity, and one of the kind of definitions of creativity that I use a lot is that creativity is about seeing patterns and making connections. Well, when you think about it that way, and you think you're a technical and analytical person, technical and analytical people are ridiculously good at seeing patterns and making connections.
Yeah.
And so I actually love working with people like that who don't think they're creative, and then they start to discover the ways in which they are creative.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
that's one of the things that I do with people, is to try to actually get them in touch with that creativity isn't about art. Right? It's not that it's only these arts things. You can be creative as a scientist. You can be creative as a CEO. You could be creative as an event organizer.
Yep.
It's really about problem solving, and that's really the crux of it.
That's awesome. I love that so much. So, in a lot of these organizations, we'll go to the audience again. How many people work in places where there's like more than one team? I know that sounds crazy. I don't know. Sometimes people like work at startups and there's like 4 of you, and
right.
Which, good on you for being here.
Sure,
but like,
right.
so like I love how you introduce so many ways of sort of like generating ideas and clearly showing that everyone can sort of generate these ideas, and that happens across an organization. And what a lot of like design system work is like, how do you sort of like corral that, right? So I guess like the question is like, how do you sort of manage like invention versus like curation, right? Which is what like sort of design system teams are like. Design system teams are meant to sort of like rein in some of that chaos a little bit, where it's like, oh, you're like almost a little too creative, and like we're trying to make it so our buttons don't look like giraffes or whatever.
But I don't think that's, I don't think that that's, the buttons don't look like giraffes.
I don't know. I'm sure it has giraffes on it. So.
So, I mean, I think it's like, to me, I actually almost see that as being more, what's the word that I want? Subversive rather than being creative, right? Like saying, like, I don't care what the rules are that are going to help everybody else do their job properly. I want it to look like a giraffe because I like giraffes.
Right.
Well, that's, you can make your own application that looks like a giraffe, but in this company, we need this consistency.
Yeah.
And the creativity may come from how you come to the point of making it consistent with everybody.
Yeah.
Like, right? Like that, or, how you, like, where the standard's coming from, how do we create the standards, and then how do we make everything work with the standard?
Yeah, yeah.
So I mean, I would actually say that I wouldn't call that creativity. I would call that, like, trying to throw a monkey wrench in the works, more so.
But people are like, I'm special.
Yeah.
Like you, this all works for everybody else, but like you don't understand. My needs are, I need those giraffe-shaped buttons. You have no idea.
Might need a job in another place. There's that.
There's that.
There is that, or like you might need to work for yourself. I mean, and it's like sometimes people aren't always in places where it's the best fit for them. But I think too that it's like, and maybe that person gets some project off to the side that doesn't affect what everything else is doing, or they're put in a position where innovating is all they do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
it's like finding that right, like,
it's
match.
Just finding the
match
right match for the person.
No, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So I have it right that you go into a bunch of companies, you work with a bunch of companies, you do this stuff with them, they're jazzed up about it, and I love how you brought up that yes, but.
It's so real, though. It's real,
so
right?
Real. It's so real.
I have experienced that so many times. It's like you die inside a little bit for that person, and especially if that person is you, and then you're just like, well, I'm never going to say anything in a meeting ever again in the history of ever because y'all don't know how to play with folks.
Right. So you go in and you do this work, and like clearly, just like the results are pretty immediate. It's like, oh wow, like yeah, we are actually collaborating. We are actually working on something together.
And we're having fun.
That's
the other thing too. That's really nice about it.
So my question to you is what are the yes buts that you hear? Whatever it's like, Denise came in, we did all this awesome stuff, but that would like never work here like long term. Like like that was a fun day or something, but like back to our
regular thing. And it's like, yeah, but no, that's one of the things that I like to accentuate, and I also want to make sure that you guys understand, like, you can actually take the things that we did, you can actually take them and you can use them yourselves. If you have a meeting where people are, having trouble coming up with stuff, you'll be like, let's just play like the story by suggestion game. Like, let's just do this. Let's do this really quick. Let's do the talk and everything. Like, I just want you to see what you're doing. You're actually talking over me, or it's like we're talking at the same time. Let's just do this. And then people go, oh, and they see it, and it's like, and it like actually makes a switch because it's just the immediacy of it. And so I have like a large kind of range of exercises and games that we play, and the nice thing is that I'm like, take this, like, I'm literally giving you a toolbox. Like, this is the day, but then these are things that you can like pull out of your toolbox anytime you want.
Yeah. Oh, that's
and
fantastic.
You can apply those.
That's great. I hear this a lot. It's sort of related to the giraffe-shaped buttons and stuff. I like design systems are killing creativity, man. Design systems, like, just, because we're, standardizing things, like, there's no room for creativity. It's a bummer.
So another thing it's a bummer.
It's a bummer.
So another thing about creativity is that creativity actually flourishes within constraints.
There we go.
Aha.
Sorry, we thought that
we just said the same thing at the same time. So it's within the constraints that you can have I personally feel, and I've experienced a lot in my life, that you have the creativity. And so like having a system like that is like kind of a nice thing where it's like, okay, we've got these things that we don't have to think about so that we can think about the things that are the real issues to solve.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that gives you actual freedom. Because if you were thinking about it all the time, every time, like how bogged down would you get in that process?
Yeah. I love it. So it's like liberating. It's like
Totally.
that's
Totally
fantastic.
liberating. Yeah.
So last question for you. Do design systems need more ayahuasca?
Natch. Or peyote, or no.
All right.
The irony is that I don't like do any substances of any sort, and so like for me to be like, of course you need ayahuasca, or at least like I don't know, just some like Palo Santo. But yeah, I mean, I think design systems are you're creative enough, doing enough good work on your own, and if you want to add ayahuasca to it, that's your choice.
This is a very, very measured answer for a ridiculous question. So everybody, give it up for Denise Jacobs.